Welcome to Nevada Week. I'm Amber Renee Dixon. The 82nd session of the Nevada Legislature kicked off February 6th with a Republican governor at the helm for the first time since 2019. While Governor Joe Lombardo should benefit from an ample state budget, he will have to work with a Democratic-controlled Assembly and Senate. Joining us to talk about what's in store for Nevadans this biennial session is Jacob Solis, State House reporter for the Nevada Independent. Jacob, welcome. So a Republican governor and an Assembly and Senate controlled by Democrats. How much activity can actually happen? How much can get accomplished this session?
Well, there should be plenty of compromise because there's actually lots of places where Democrats and Republicans agree with each other. Obviously, there will be some clashes, the places that they don't, but things like state worker raises, maybe there's some areas on education, for instance, right? There's plenty of little areas where Republicans and Democrats can find common ground and end up passing some bills. I think it's really those big topic areas where we're going to see the clashes.
And if we're talking about the governor using his power to veto, how will the legislature be able to, this legislature in particular, be able to override that?
Well, it'll be tricky. So the Democrats have a supermajority in the Assembly, which could override a veto, but they don't have one in the Senate. And so if there is a veto and they can't find that extra senator, then they can't override a veto, and that's that. Now, things could change after the 2024 elections, and Democrats could pick up another seat in the Senate, and that'll make the next legislative session very different, but that's all in the future.
Hey, and according to your reporting, this is not a terribly unique situation with a Republican governor and then a democratically controlled legislature, right?
That's right. We actually, 9 out of the last 15 years has had a Republican governor and a democratically controlled legislature in both houses. So we've really returned to the norm here.
All right, so you talked about education as being an area for bipartisan support. Governor Lombardo is proposing $2 billion to fund K through 12 education. Democrats want $250 million more. What do they want it for, and how likely is it Republicans will approve that?
That's right. Well, the Democrats have proposed that money to pay for teacher raises. Now, the Republicans have said that they want the money for teacher raises to be a local decision. They leave that up to the school districts. And certainly we've heard the governor's chief of staff, Ben Kiekefer, say he's welcoming that proposal if the Democrats can say where that money is going to come from. Now, one of the sticking points may be that the governor's office wants to put a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, in the state's rainy day fund, which the state drained under the Sisolak administration because of COVID and to pay for all these kinds of pandemic costs. So I think if there's going to be a point of friction, it's going to be the Democrats saying we ought to use that money to pay for things. And in this instance, $250 million worth for teacher pay raises.
And then opportunity scholarships, that falls under the kind of controversial topic of school choice. Governor Lombardo wants $50 million for those. How will they work? He also wants to expand access to them. And what's the argument against them?
Right. So opportunity scholarships are an existing program the state has that basically allows parents to use government money to send their kids to a private school. So right now, the program is funded at about $7 million and is available to anyone up to about 300% of the federal poverty line. What the governor wants to do is fund it to $50 million and allow anyone at 500% of the poverty line to get access to it. That ends up being over $100,000 in annual income. That ends up being over $100,000 in annual income for a family of four. And so it's a big change, but it's also a lot less than what a lot of school choice advocates were asking for. Frankly, there was a program under Brian Sandoval called Education Savings Accounts that was much more expansive. That was a sort of quote unquote true school choice program. And Lombardo's office chose not to attempt to fund that because of an ongoing court battle over, the program might be legal, but the funding mechanism they originally used wasn't. And so now it's in this legal limbo and no one wants to touch it.
On the topic of housing, there seems to be bipartisan support for changing the rapid summary eviction process. That could impact a lot of Nevadans. What is the process currently, and how likely do you think it'll be changed?
That's right. And I think that this is one of those compromise points where I think both Democrats and Republicans agree that something's got to give on summary evictions specifically. And the governor, Joe Lombardo, told our CEO, John Ralston, that, he doesn't know exactly what he wants to see change, but certainly the onus needs to shift away from the tenant in these sort of eviction proceedings toward the landowner. But what does that look like? What do the specifics look like? I think that's really when we're going to get into the meat of things, and that's where disagreements might start to arise.
It is interesting that if you are evicted, you have to pretty much go to the courthouse yourself and file to protect yourself before that landlord even has to do anything. It makes Nevada a unique state. We'll be watching that. And finally, healthcare costs, reproductive healthcare access for women. Those could be some contentious topics under the healthcare umbrella. But mental health, that is somewhere we may see some bipartisanship as well, right?
That's right. The governor in particular has made mental health a focus, right? If you heard his state of the state, he talked about mental health. In interviews, he loves to talk about it. And he likes to talk about the infrastructure around mental health, providing bed space, providing, clinical care to people who might need assistance. And certainly the Democrats are all for that as well. It's going to come down to money. Who's paying for what? Where does that money go? How is it being spent? Again, the devil is always in the details.
I think that'll be what we see throughout this legislative session. Jacob Solis, thank you for joining us. Our viewers can expect regular reports from you throughout this legislative session. You and your Nevada Independent colleagues, who you told me are all staying in an apartment together right now. Maybe that was something that happened with that audio issue. For now, thank you for your time and your thorough coverage.